The Animal, Part 1. The waves rocked the small boat out in the middle of the ocean. It was foggy, and the air smelled of salt. A young man sat patiently, his skin burnt, holding a fishing rod tightly within his calloused hands. The line slightly twitched. He yanked at it. The struggle took 10 minutes of grunting and tugging. What he pulled out was a black fish that was about 1.5 feet long, and he immediately threw it into the bucket. It was always his morning routine to wake up at the crack of dawn to fish and to fill the buckets up to the brim for the village. He fired up the engine, which began to splash along the surface and propelled the boat forward, and within half an hour, through the thick fog, a silhouette of his home island appeared.
Just a few more minutes and I should be back home again,
he thought to himself. But then, suddenly, his surroundings began to darken. It was so dark that he could hardly see. He turned around and saw a colossal, misshapen mass covering the entire sky.
What the hell?
It slowly disappeared into the sea, causing ripples of waves to crash against the boat. He held onto the side so he would not get thrown overboard. The boat thrashed violently, turning into a gradual sway, and then stopped. He set his eyes firmly in the direction where the colossal shadow disappeared. He stood there contemplating what has happened when suddenly a soft chirp rang out at the far end of the boat. He paid no attention to the first one, but it was only through the louder second shrilling chirp that he noticed something. He turned around and saw a bird perched on top of a railing with feathers fully erected, and it made a snake-like hiss. It was bigger than a hawk, but smaller than an eagle. The feathers were a muddy brown, while the beak was a dull yellow, and with its tiny jet-black talons, it continued to advance towards the young man. The man was not even threatened one bit. It was only a tiny bird, he thought. He waved his arms, frightening the bird enough to fly away and vanish into the dark cloud. High-pitched noises soon followed, and it was coming from the fog. Curiosity got the hold of him, so he leaned forward and cupped the outside of his ear to listen better. Coming from the dark cloud was the sounds of thousands of chirps and flapping wings, and they were all coming towards the boat. A flock of birds bolted out of the bellowing smoke, barraging the young man in a fury of feathers and talons. He clutched at his face, shielding himself from the blows. He dove into the safety of the decks of the ship. The air clamored with the shrieks and cries of tens of thousands of birds, flapping their wings against the wind. The flock looked more of a colossal, terrible black current of air rampaging through the fog and frightening the poor man in his tiny boat. And just as the birds quickly arrived, they all vanished into the fog. It was quiet. The man was breathing heavily. His hands were trembling, palms badly bruised and slashed from the sharp talons. He winced as he closed his fist and looked to where the birds vanished. The only birds that were known to live near the ocean were the seagulls and brown pelicans. Some of these birds that flew overhead were, well, not those kinds of birds. A lot of them had colorful feathers, while some were dull. Some had wingspans longer than his arms, while some could fit in the palm of his hand. While thinking on this, he made his way into the lower deck to bandage himself up. Immediately as soon as he entered the bathroom, the mirror presented a young man with cuts and bruises across his face. Oh, great. He croaked as he caressed the scars with a small cotton ball that was drenched with alcohol. After bandaging up his injuries, he began to steer the vessel towards home. Only, he no longer saw the silhouette of his home island. He walked through all corners of the boat to see the outline. Still no outline of an island.
Damn it, I can't see a thing through this blast fog. Oh, what to do. I might as well start fishing until it clears up, I guess.
He began fishing once more to pass the time, but within a half an hour, he grew bored, for the fish weren't even biting.
A book would be a perfect occasion for times like these.
It wasn't long until he heard the pattering footsteps and saw a woman running along the water surface. She had olive skin, gray hair, and wore crimson garbs. Wrinkles covered her face, and bags sagged heavily around her eyes. She looked like a lady of mid-90s, but sprinted like a Olympic athlete in their early 20s. Just as quickly as she arrived, she vanished into the fog. He stood there perplexed. Did he really just see a woman running along the surface of the water? He heard tales of sailors witnessing a person walking across the ocean, but he just assumed it was all a myth.
Hello? Hello? Can you please help me out? I seem to be lost in this fog and was wondering if you could help me, please?
He waited.
Or, not.
He sighed.
Half an hour passed by and still nothing.
A familiar pattering of footsteps echoed through the fog. It was the same woman again. This time she was leading a child by the hand who was crying and pleading to be returned to his family.
Hey!
He screamed as they vanished into the fog. He rushed over and cranked the engine into its top speed. The boat U-turned and raced furiously through the dense fog. He flicked on the light, producing a bright stream that sliced through the gray clouds. He held onto the steering wheel tightly and lowered his torso to embrace the wind that was beating down on him.
Kid, if you are there, say something.
Help me! The sound was coming from the southwest. He turned the steering wheel sharply.
Hold on, kid. I'm coming.
The boat continued to skid and skip like a stone along the surface of the water. He pursued the woman through the fog for 5 minutes, screaming for the little boy. A loud noise of earth splitting thundered across the ocean. It was so fierce that it tossed the boat around and shook the man to his core. He felt the ocean rising and heard the sound of a waterfall rushing. The fog began to clear up. The higher he ascended, the wind stopped bellowing in his face, and his boat was being pulled back towards the rushing water. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, glancing at the rearview mirror, and saw that the water was falling over the edge of a waterfall and that the boat was being pulled towards it.
Come on.
The current was too strong for the boat and was being sucked in. The ocean continued to rise higher into the sky. Soon the clouds began to brush against the salty water. As the boat gradually made its way towards the edge, the water became more louder and more terrifying. The boat keeled over as it reached the very edge. The man grasped the steering wheel for dear life. He looked down with bulging eyes to see a tremendous body of water plunging into the foggy abyss. It had to be a 7,000 feet drop, a perilous fall for any man.
Dear God, please don't let me die. I don't want to die.
He shrieked in terror, and with one final push, he was screaming, falling into the darkness that awaited him below. The last thing he saw is a large island rising from the ocean. Hey guys, thank you for listening to my project, and I really appreciate that you took the time and effort just to listen to me. And be sure to subscribe to my channel so you know all that story goodness I'm going to bring out. And be sure to, have a good day. As always, stay cool.